All right. Wow, these things always shock me at how loud they are when I start. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Working Group Chairs Lunch Forum. Come on in, try and ruffle your bags quietly. First of all, this is now part of the IETF program. It's on the agenda, and it is on MeetEcho. And so we have the note well, which you see all of the time. Our agenda for today is our administrivia. Then we're going to have some conversation from the Secretariat. We're going to talk about the hackathon and the relationship to progressing work in working groups through the hackathon. And we're going to have an open mic session during which one of the topics will be working group chair training. So, with no further ado,
oh my gosh, how does this move? Is it like, do you remember that? So we can both use it. Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alexa Morris. I'm the Executive Director. Hello. I'm with the Secretariat.
And I am Stephanie McCammon. I am also with the Secretariat. Some of you get emails from me around scheduling time asking me to desperately reduce your session time, and I really appreciate all of you.
Ready?
We're ready.
All right.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about managing conflicts in the agenda and how we can make things better for everyone. So currently, we have a few challenges that we have been encountering. One of those challenges is the retrieve all information from previous meeting button. I think the intent for this button was a really good one that would allow you guys not to have to actually enter in every set of data for every meeting, and you could actually just copy over all of your conflicts and all of that great stuff. Unfortunately, what's happening is that the review of that information isn't happening in a way that keeps it up to date for every meeting. So that's been a challenge. Another challenge has been that attendance numbers, I think this also stems from the retrieve all information from previous meeting button. The attendance numbers from the previous meeting that we announced when we announced scheduling, it's included in that opening scheduling email that we sent out, aren't being reflected for the next session, for the next meeting. And the last challenge that we've been running into is that the use of first, second, and third priority conflicts isn't the actual, how they are important to you isn't quite clear to us. So we know that first priority is a big deal, right? But we don't know why. We don't particularly understand what the importance of that is. Is it a chair conflict or a technology conflict, or is it absolutely mandatory even when you get down to the third priority conflicts? So those are the things that we've been encountering lately. So we can go to the next slide, I think. Oh yeah, go for it.
So I had the opportunity to speak with the ISG about this morning to get some ideas from them about how we could handle this moving forward. And they are going to be discussing this on a tel-chat coming up, but one of the ideas was to change the first, second, and third priority and reduce it to two categories, which would be mandatory and informal. This is, important. Formal intelligence, yes. So this is not finalized. This is something the ISG is just starting to discuss. And if you have any immediate reactions to this or any suggestions, you're welcome to send that feedback to the ISG list.
And just to clarify really quickly about first, second, and third priority conflicts, we try to avoid all of them, right? Like we never put out a pre-preliminary agenda that is full of third or second priority conflicts. We do our best to minimize those as much as possible. So we take all of your conflicts into account. They're all important to us. So one of the things that we are going to try to do is to make some changes to the session request tool that will allow the information to be a little more effective and efficient for us during the scheduling. So the tool will be updated at some point to display actual attendance numbers for previous meetings And I believe during the ISG chat this morning, they talked about displaying the attendance numbers for the previous 3 meetings, which will give you a better idea kind of if you had a hot topic and, you know, if you saw a real jump in attendance and then it dipped down. So that'll be really nice. And the button to retrieve information from the previous meeting will be going away. I'm sorry. We will still find a way to make it easy for you to copy that information over, or at least we're hopeful that we can, but still require some kind of review. And so there were a couple potential options to replace the button discussed by the ISG this morning, and Alexa can speak to those.
So one idea is to have to review every single field and actually copy each one individually. So that will encourage you to actually look at what you had requested last time and copy it if it's appropriate, or change it if it's not. The other option that was discussed was actually having everybody manually re-enter everything to really encourage you to think about what you actually need for the session. They're discussing it. If you have strong opinions about it, you should definitely send those to the ISG list.
Okay. So that's basically everything we wanted to talk about regarding scheduling. So I see that there are some questions. Please go.
Hi, I'm Kent. I like the idea of having the attendance for the previous 3 meetings, but can we also have a baseline with the attendance of the overall IETF conference for the last 3 meetings?
Oh, interesting. So actually have on-site attendee numbers, like final attendee numbers, you mean?
I didn't mean that, but some regions are more attended than other regions. So, you know, if I know my meetings are going up, but it could just because that's more attended region.
So do you want the meeting number next
I
time?
want 2 numbers. I want the attendance for my session and the attendance for the total IETF.
Okay, interesting. We will look into that. Hi, Karsten.
Carsten Bormann. Anything is better than first, second, and third priority. I never have any idea what these categories mean. So if you call them mandatory, nice to have, something, so I have an idea what part goes where. But the main comment I want to make is we are all engineers, so we actually have a GitHub repository between the chairs for the information that goes into the session request. And each time we have to copy over this information into the web form. So yes, we are using the retrieve thing and looking, did anything change? But it would be really nice to have a file somewhere on GitHub that we just change and then we do the session request from that file. Maybe a little bit of an engineering software guy request, but it would simplify our life. JSON file, whatever, that we can just put in and discuss beforehand between the chairs and make sure it's all right before we submit it.
It's very interesting. Thank you.
It doesn't have to use GitHub for the submission, but just being able to send in a file with the information, that would be great.
So the conflicts, I'm actually going to suggest making it 4 lists. But this is how I tend to think about my conflict list. Sorry, Jeff Haas. The way I tend to actually do my conflicts is there's conflicts that the chairs can't have. No, my day job is BGP. I have to go to IDR. Now, that's an example. There's conflicts that my key participants, my working group, have. No, there are 6 people that I pretty much know they're going to be there. They're responsible for most of the drafts, that sort of thing. So that's another set of categories. Third one is related working groups that we should not conflict with. You know, BFD overlaps with like OAM type groups. We should actually overlap with other ops related type things that do that, even though they're not in routing. And the last one is sort of it'd be nice to avoid these things because there's overlap with participation, but those are the ones that you guys tend to say, well, if it happens, it happens.
Thank you.
Andy Malice. One thing I've found is that the scheduling tool usually opens before we know what the BOFs are. And so it's hard to say, I don't want to conflict with this particular BOF, which leads me to just say in the notes, I want to avoid all BOFs in the routing area, for example. But you guys might want to say something to the IAB and ISG, but perhaps finalizing the list of BOFs earlier.
Do you think that I think what we've been trying to do is leave the request tool open later so that working group chairs can make edits to their sessions after the BOFs have been approved? Has that been helpful at all? I don't know if anybody noticed that.
I really hadn't gone back, but now that you mention it, I could.
Well, it's an option, and I'll make it a little more clearer in future correspondence.
Okay, cool, thanks.
You bet.
Hi, Al Morton, following up on that. It would be helpful if we got,
Say your name.
I did, Al Morton.
Okay.
That was it.
You mumbled your name, yes.
Oh,
I didn't know you.
I'm amazeball.
Yeah, we got your name, Al. Thank you.
Yes, you are.
So it would be helpful if the IESG sent a message to the chairs when the BOFs have been approved. That way we could go back and review the conflicts we've written down, and those BOFs will be maybe in the selection list, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we currently get notice of that, at least on chairs list, and that would help me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Lennox. So 2 things. First, as somebody who is flaky, it would be helpful if you sent a mail to the chairs list like 2 days before the deadline saying, please remember to schedule your working group meeting.
We do try to send reminders,
Okay,
but
okay.
we'll try to send more.
Okay, and then I guess then that could also include, by the way, these are the BOFs that have now been scheduled, so you might want to review. Then the other thing is, I know the blue sheets have a actual start time, actual end time field on them. So if you could have on the scheduling field, this is how long your session actually took the last 3 times, that might be helpful for figuring out how much time to request. If that's actually transcribed anywhere. If it's not, I don't want to make more work for you.
Thank you.
This is Barry Liba. I'm trying to figure out what the real point of the 4 levels that was proposed are. Because as I look at it, this is not for our information, right? It's for help you guys figure out how to avoid conflicts. And so what I have always been using 1, 2, and 3 for is 1 means we can't have a meeting if this conflict exists, that people will just be too conflicted with that. 2 means we can have the meeting, we'll be missing some important people, but we can manage. And 3 means it would be nice to avoid this, but it's not a big deal. And I would still like to keep that kind of distinction in whatever we came up with next. Maybe what you were getting at also was maybe having time conflicts, time slot conflicts as well as meeting conflicts. So I can't be there on Tuesday, or I can't be there between noon and 6, or you can always put that in the comments, I guess, and I don't know how we would do it otherwise. The other thing that I wanted to say when I got up was it would help me if, for putting in conflicts in the future, if I was informed with non-parallel conflicts that came up. When another working group says my working group is a conflict and I didn't say it back, it would be useful to know that so I can evaluate that situation and decide whether it's something I need to pay attention to.
Thank you, Barry.
I'm far too short. Bron Gondwana. I actually wanted to respond to the idea of holding open the option to change things to really late. I had someone who wanted to be here for the hackathon and 1 session, which turns out to be on Thursday, and so staying for the entire week. Would not have stayed for the entire week if he hadn't known, but had to book accommodation and book transport in advance. The longer you leave that, the harder it is for people who can't be here for the entire meeting to schedule their life around which bits they're coming to. So don't leave it right to the last minute.
Okay.
Thanks.
David Black, suggestion on BOFs. If memory serves, the IESG closes the window for BOF proposals before they make the approval decision. We can probably figure out the potential BOF conflicts against the BOF candidate list without waiting for the puff of smoke for which ones are actually approved. Then the ones that aren't approved, you don't have to worry about. We've taken care of.
And just to clarify real quickly, David, you mean we could figure this out? What we mean is that we, the working group chairs, and we're not asking the secretary.
No. What I'm saying is, okay, a little more precisely. Thanks for poking me. If the working group chairs write the conflicts against the BOF candidate list. That conflict list can be prepared earlier before the IESG decides which ones they're going to approve. And then the overworked secretariat has a simpler scheduling problem when some of those BOFs aren't approved and there's some conflicts they can ignore.
Right. That was part of, you got to the point I was trying to make, is some of what we're talking about here, we're not asking the secretariat to do things. We're talking about our own processes and our leadership's processes, and we need to be clear about that.
Right. And what I'm suggesting is we can buy ourselves a little bit of advanced time in setting up the conflicts.
Right.
Because when you know what the BOF candidate list is, you can figure which ones. Because I'm in the same situation as somebody else, which is that we routinely write down do not conflict with any transport area BOFs.
Right. And there is a BOF wiki, and everybody can find out the BOFs that are under consideration in advance.
But just really quickly, if a BOF hasn't been approved and hasn't been held before in any function, it won't be in the data tracker, so you can't actually enter it as a real conflict. You would have to enter it in the special requests.
Juan Carlos Zúñiga. So I guess touching on what Carsten suggested and Barry as well, and coming back to this priorities thing, I understand that is a way to, okay, we communicate, this is my wishes. You have to guess what I'm thinking and what it actually means, and then you come up with a response, and then I cry out loud, no, that was not what I was thinking. But it's not your fault, of course, because the tool doesn't allow it. So regardless of the number of priorities, probably something a little more dynamic, I think would be helpful, because often we can also help you do that, right? So we know who we have the conflict with, and often we have that communication with the other chair. So we can figure it out and provide some proposals or solution. Had we known that more or less you are pointing towards this conflict. Just to give you an example, if I'm at the airport and I'm losing a flight and I get to the flight attendant and it's like, solve my problem, it's going to be a big mess. Whereas if I say, I have this issue, could you get me in that flight? Yes, next. And then a lot of times, this quick interaction and us giving you a little more feedback, but also you giving us perhaps feedback in advance, like, okay, chairs, this is what the agenda looks like so far. Are you happy, or is there something you guys can sort out? Maybe we can get together with another chair or another group. Sometimes this week there's a conflict on Friday with another group that is meeting outside IETF. So how can I tell you that with a tool, right? I have to figure it out myself. I have to provide you the proposal. So maybe either adding one more cycle with the chairs on this preliminary agenda type of thing, or having a dynamic tool, whatever is also more convenient for you, like what Carsten was proposing, I think would be useful before we start publishing preliminary agendas to the broad public.
That's interesting, thank you. And just so everyone knows, you can put any information you want the Secretariat to know in that special request field. So if there is an outside meeting that a lot of your participants have to attend, just throw that in there. We read them, we pay attention to them, they're important.
I'd like to reinforce that, because I use that special request field a lot. And in particular, if I have a regular remote participant, and I would prefer the meeting to be in a particular time of day. So I would strongly encourage folks to put all of those additional bits, without overwhelming, be reasonable. But those additional bits going in the special request field do actually get looked at, in my experience anyway.
And just as a quick disclaimer, we try to honor them all, but it doesn't always work. But we do really try, and we read them.
Dave Waltermeyer. On that note, I came in late, and I just wanted to make sure that you were thanked for all of the work that you do to organize this craziness.
Thanks, guys.
And on that note, one way of kind of looking at the first, second, and third priorities is, must avoid conflict, should avoid conflict, may avoid conflict. Is there anything that we could do to actually help with that? Like, for example, if we were willing to split our session, instead of doing 2 hours, do 2 1-hour sessions, to maybe have some conflict for one, but no conflict for the other. Is there anything that we could do to help with that?
Yeah, so again, the special request field really works well for this, because TSV working group always puts in that one of their 2 sessions can't conflict with RTC Web, but we see that. And so when we're clicking on all of the individual sessions, and the tool actually outlines when there's a listed conflict in the display. But then we know that it's okay if it actually conflicts with one of the RTC web sessions. So again, special requests, guys.
Yeah.
It really works.
Would it be worth adding a checkbox or something to the form saying that we would accept the split session or something?
Yeah,
like that?
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Just having a checkbox that says you would be cool with that, because we do have to do that sometimes. And typically what I would do is just email you, right? And ask if it's okay, or email you, ask if you can go in a shorter session. But yes, checkboxes are helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So Spencer Dawkins, I'm glad somebody else said thank you, so I didn't have to be the first person to say it, but thank you both for all that you do, especially in this area. And a thing I wanted to say in front of the chairs, just I know that a lot of BOF requests come from people that aren't chairs, but it's pretty common in a lot of areas that you are then recruiting an experienced chair to be a co-BOF chair. That's like a thing we do a lot, not every time, but a lot. So just so you know this, for IETF 101, every single BOF request except for IASA 2.0 was entered into the BOF wiki less than a week before the cutoff. And the ISG was reviewing them, like, I think that was on a Friday, and the ISG was reviewing them on like maybe a Monday or Wednesday or whatever it was. So anything that you can do to help surface this stuff earlier is going to help you. It's going to help the area directors more than it helps you, and it's going to help the secretariat, where they will carry you out of the room on in honor. I think I'm really passionate about trying to do better on the BOF stuff, basically in the new work proposals in general, because it's critical to what we do, and I don't think I've been on the ISG 5 years so far. I don't think we steer much when it comes to putting new work in, because we don't have time, and I would like for us to do better than that. And anything that you all can do to kind of nudge people to say, have you talked to anybody about this? Because you may be talking to your area director, but the other area directors don't know. Other people who are wandering around in the same space don't know. So they're putting in their request that overlaps or conflicts or something. Like I say, I think this is something we need to get better at, and I think this is something that working group chairs could really help with. And thank you in advance for anything that you could do there.
So this is the last question on this topic.
Okay, Barry Lee, but I want to follow up on what Spencer said, because I've discussed what I'm going to say now with Spencer, and I see there are a few other ADs in the room. I think the way the IESG can help us with this is by taking the idea that people are driven by deadlines and moving the deadline. So I'm going to propose to them that they put the deadline to be 3 weeks before they have the BOF call. The BOF submission deadline would give them 3 weeks to review the BOF, and they would try to commit to reviewing them in the first week and contacting people with feedback on their BOF proposals to try to use the next 2 weeks to make the BOF proposal right so it doesn't get rejected. Then when the BOF call happens, at least you are prepared with feedback and you aren't surprised when they say, we're not going to approve your BOF. I'm interested if someone wants to come up to me afterwards and say, that's a good idea or that sucks, and let me know. But that's what I'm going to propose to the IESG, and I think that will help that situation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for letting us have a quick chat. And we're always here for you. Thank you.
So, so the second thing that I had asked the Secretariat to do was sort of a short, that what I had in mind was, what can we, the working group chairs, do to help the Secretariat, and then sort of a slightly, and then just sort of turn that around and, what are the biggest questions you guys generally have for the Secretariats? I don't want to spend too much time on this, maybe 5-7 minutes or so, but Stephanie, you said you had a top.
Yeah, I just have a few things that people typically ask me, and I'm happy to just quickly share them. I think most of you are all pretty aware, but just for clarity's sake, and one we actually already kind of covered with the scheduling thing is a lot of people ask if they can be on a particular day of the meeting. And this is really interesting, right? Because we can usually get a working group on a particular day of a meeting. And then when we take it to the ISG, there's so much shuffling that happens, and we still really try and pay attention to those special requests, but it often or occasionally gets shuttled outside of that particular day. So if you have a range of days or a particular day you want, please let us know. We're happy to try and accommodate that, and we never ignore you. There's actually a special little asterisk in the corner of the request in the tool that shows us that there is information in that note so that we can click on it and pay attention to it. So that's one of the questions that comes up all the time. Other questions that come up often are, where are my blue sheets? And if they're not in the clipboard, which we always try and have them in the clipboard before a session starts, although in this venue it's very difficult getting from one side to the other, as you all know, they're actually in this folder. And so if they're not in the clipboard, just flip through the folder. You guys' acronym is at the top. Just pop them in the clipboard.
While she's giving us these questions, when she and I were talking about this in advance, I was thinking, really? People ask you this? And so the mere fact that people ask her this made me feel that we really ought to sort of just have quick reminders about some of these things.
And one of the things Karen and I also talked about was, especially for new working group chairs, I often walk into a room and they are a little flustered right before their session starts. And that's not a very good feeling. So we talked about potentially the Secretariat putting together a little video of what a breakout room looks like and what the important pieces are for chairs to know about. So if you guys think that would be useful, we will happily do that. The other question we get all the time is, what is the red button? People think, it can end the world or take over the world, which we all wish, but no, it just mutes or unmutes the Meet Echo queue. Another thing that comes up all the time is AV issues. And I have to ask that if you have an AV issue, please send a ticket to MTD. Or if I'm in the room, just flag me down. Because typically it's something super easy to solve, batteries or but if you don't specify which mic it is, I actually have to stand at the back of the room and wait for someone to speak into one of the mics to see which one is dead if someone doesn't flag me down. So if I walk in, just grab me, just hail me down. I'm happy to come up and help you guys. That's what I'm here for, right? Some of the other questions, do you have something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Some of the other questions are the clickers. We put clickers in every room. They're IETF clickers. They don't always work. Fred, I'm sorry if you're in here. But we do our best to try and have equipment that works for you guys. Maybe we need to make them brighter or something because I feel like they get lost in the shuffle, but they are on every table. If you don't have one, again, the MTD queue will solve your problems.
There's also a chance if you don't have one, the previous working group chair took it with them. So
That's
please
also
remember
possible.
to leave.
But I always have some
in the
in
room.
my bag.
Adam Roach, just a real quick question to help remember. What does MTD stand for?
Meeting Trouble Desk.
Thank you.
And so really, those are the main things that working group chairs, I feel, have issues with during the meeting. If anybody has any questions, hey, Pete.
Hey, Stephanie. Two things. First, talking to Brian, there's a working group chairs, how to chair a meeting wiki. None of this information is in there.
So that's actually going to be it's going to be the first topic on the open forum is we really need to take a look at all of the working group chair training material and update it and make it cleaner and more concise. So
Excellent. Thing two, which is because I got here late and I would have asked in the first go round, but there was an experiment a while ago with meeting room arrangement, which I have a thing about. Being able to do sort of like a center table and then rows in directions behind it. One question is, have we gotten anywhere further with that, or it's just no one has asked for it? And if answer is the second, maybe get an idea from this room of who would be interested in having such a meeting room arrangement, because I think it would be great.
I'm not exactly sure what happened to that experiment. I think that's more of a question for the ISG, but I'm happy to look into it and get back to you, Pete.
David Lawrence, I just wanted to say that this is the first time I've heard the phrase working group chair training material. I was not aware that that thing existed. I mean, yeah, there's documentation here and there, but I wasn't even pointed to when I became a chair. So.
Yeah, well, that was one of the first thing on my list is working group chair onboarding. And in all fairness, I have a new working group chair, co-working group chair in my working group, and he told me this week that he didn't know anything about it. And I'm like, well, I think your experienced working group chair is probably supposed to help you out there, but we do need to have just a simple set of materials. And I'd really like to see those developed. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask for a couple of volunteers to help us with the design team to put that together. And in particular, if you're a new working group chair, you would be ideal for that, because these are the questions I had that I didn't realize the answers to. But that's sort of foreshadowing to the last discussion. Go ahead.
Dave Taylor. So the discussion of mics actually reminded me of another reminder that might be helpful and might have actually been helpful to me earlier. So I've had 2 working groups this week so far. And in the first one, when the laptop plugged in, it would project to the screen that was facing the speaker, but not up on the big one. And there was no AV person in the room. And I think it was actually, the reminder is check your screen resolution. If that happens, lower your screen resolution, right? And I didn't think of that at times we switched to a different laptop. The second time, there was actually an AV guy in the room that came up and says, I'm your AV guy, do you have any questions or whatever? And that was in the first room. Said, no, it's actually working fine right now. And so thank you when there was those, but I think it's and so the hypothesis is that the ones that are mounted here work fine, and the ones that are sitting on a table are perhaps less reliable and less flexible than the ones that are ceiling mounted. That was the AV guy's hypothesis. But the reminder is, if you're having projection problems, lower your screen resolution.
Thank you. Well, that's really all I have.
All right. So thank you very much, Stephanie.
Of course.
If you all have any more questions here, everybody please thank Stephanie again.
Yay.
The second topic on our agenda is the hackathon and its relationship to progressing work in the IETF.
Yeah.
We were just talking about.
All right. So, hi, folks. I had the pleasure of talking. I'm Charles Eckel, by the way, and along with Barry here, and a lot of help from the Secretariat. We've been putting on these hackathons, and I spoke to you, I don't know, a few IETFs ago, just to tell you what the hackathon is. I'm not here to really spend much time on that this time around, but rather to talk about some ways in which I hope that we can, like what can we do to make the hackathon more useful for you and for the work you're doing in your working group. I want to let you know what we're doing now, some thoughts that I have about what we could do to make it more useful for you. And then, of course, get feedback from you as to what we can do. So just as a summary, here are the goals of the hackathon. And they're kind of twofold. The one is we're trying to make the work we're doing in the IETF progress more quickly, with the idea being that if we don't just talk about things, if we actually write up some code to test out what we're thinking, that can be really good. That can help help us find issues, gaps, ambiguities quicker. And then we can use this time to flesh out ideas. At the same time, we're creating some running code that even if the protocol or whatever it is we're specifying isn't completely done, it's a way for people to start using it. So a protocol you're defining, if you're at the same time building a library that I can use that supports that protocol. For me as a developer, that makes it a lot quicker for me to start using this technology that you're standardizing. So those are things we're trying to do. Another thing we're trying to do is to bring more people into the IETF. It mentions here young people, but really it's just, I'd say, a new set of people. We want to bring more developers into the IETF. We want to bring more people from, say, university. Working with code is something that they're often much more attracted to than working with a document. It's actually may come as a surprise if you think of the name of a hackathon, but for a lot of people, it's a lot easier for them to step into a hackathon and feel like they're a productive member of a group as opposed to going into a working group meeting where they haven't read all the drafts and now they're listening to conversations that they have a hard time following. So, I found it as a really good way to onboard people or to bring them into the IETF. So with that in mind, just to give you some idea of where we're at, the hackathon's been growing. This last time we had 272 people register. Now of those 216, we actually counted as coming in and being on site. There were another 26 of them that said they were going to participate remotely. I actually think we missed some people maybe, and that we had more than 216. The number that register typically is pretty close to how many people actually come. Of those, 74 of them, this was their first experience with the IETF. And the little star just means that this is based on information that they entered into our registration page. So it may not be 100% accurate, like if someone didn't show up, but it's pretty close. So to me, that's really interesting. I mean, 74 people, this is, their first IETF experience, period. 109 people, this was their first time at an IETF hackathon. So maybe they had been to an IETF meeting before, but had never been to a hackathon. And this is also a very interesting number, and the fact that it matches exactly the first IETF event, I don't think it's exactly the same people, although of course there's a lot of overlap. But 74 people attended the hackathon but didn't stick around for the IETF meeting. On the one hand, I think that's kind of cool. To me, it makes me think, oh wow, okay, so the hackathon's really attractive to them. But the hackathon is free, so they didn't have to pay for it. Whereas the meeting costs money. To me, it shows an opportunity where I hope that these people come back, they'll attend another hackathon, and maybe then they'll decide to stay for an IETF meeting. So the better we can make their hackathon experience, and maybe there's something we can do to help integrate them into the IETF at that time so that they'll want to stay for the meetings. Yeah.
I just had a quick, Dave Waltermeyer, a quick clarifying question. So for the folks that are not attending the IETF meeting, do you have a sense of whether they're local or from somewhere else?
It tends to be predominantly people who are pretty local or a quick train ride away. Not always. Have had people travel, a couple examples of people traveling from Europe to the ones we've had in Asia, which was really surprising to me, but they found the hackathon that useful to them. But yeah, predominantly it's people who are within a short range. And the fact that it's on the weekend works out really well too. They don't need to miss work or whatever. Okay, this is a list of projects, and I'm just showing this so in case, hopefully if there were projects related to your working group, you were aware of them, but if you just do a quick scan of this list, maybe you can see some stuff that you're like, oh wow, that would have been interesting for my working group, or somewhat related. And these are arranged somewhat, or they are alphabetical to the extent I was able to alphabetize. And there's a whole second set, so I'll let you take a quick look at that. But then, so we had like 35 projects, I think, somewhere in that range. So quite a few little independent bits of work going on. Anyone can volunteer to lead a project at the hackathon. And one of my asks for you would be, as a working group chair, to make sure people are aware of this and maybe think about drafts that are in your working group or things that people have brought that you haven't adopted yet, and maybe encourage them if you think it would make sense. Hey, why don't you go and test some of this stuff out? Or why don't you try something at a hackathon, then come back to us with some experience from that, and that might help either justify bringing it into the working group or help move the stuff forward. So at the hackathon, we at the end, we have project presentations, and these are very brief presentations. We say 3 minutes or less, and it's been getting shorter kind of as the number of projects increases. But But we're really asking them to focus on what the problem is they're trying to solve, how they solved it, but then primarily on what they learned. And something that's really important is that we try to get them to talk about how are they going to bring it back into the working group. What is the information that came out of this weekend that they're going to bring back into the working group? So that's one way that we try to tie it back in to what's happening. And so hopefully in your working groups, you're seeing this. Just a show of hands, how many of you have had people in your working group like present what they did at the IETF hackathon? Okay, that's a great number to see. Thank you for that. Thank you for putting time into the agenda. I hope you're finding that a useful use of agenda time. And those of you who haven't tried that yet, maybe think about if it would be appropriate to do it at a future meeting. Those project presentations that I mentioned, what we're doing right now is there's, you'll see in IETF 101 project presentations. That's where we're putting them right now. They're in GitHub. I'm actually going to copy them over into the data tracker because I know not everyone's comfortable or uses GitHub. We don't necessarily like that to be the source of truth. So I'll copy it over. But during the hackathon, we found it a lot easier to use GitHub for this. The other thing we use this GitHub IETF hackathon org for is in case someone doesn't have a home for their code, they can we can host their code there. So it's just a way for them to get their code out so that they can work on it collectively. Yeah, Linda.
This is Linda Dunbar, and I have a suggestion. The reason for this is I have a high school daughter, and she's taking computer science AP class. So I was just looking at her curriculum. I was very proud that the first few chapters about IETF, and they're asking the kids, say, if you want to do TCP, just think TCP doesn't even exist. How would you do it, right? I thought that was quite interesting. So it would be nice to have some kind of starter kit for those high school kids to participate.
Some kind of what? Sorry.
Starting kit, like an introduction, like how do you get started, like so they can participate remotely in classroom. That would be very good to kind of advocate IETF work and to the younger generation and for them to be interested.
Okay, happy to try to work with you on that. There's two challenges, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but just keep in mind when you're thinking about how this is going to work. The stuff we work on in the IETF is very broad. When I showed all those projects, it's over a wide range of stuff. So having anything that's going to prepare you to work on a wide variety of stuff is very challenging. Also, remote participation is something where we allow and I would say we're not very good at it. We don't have much in place to make it super easy. We use Meetecho, and that's good for presentations. You can't really just have it up and running for, you can't dedicate it to each project, for example. We don't have that ability. So each team I kind of just leave on their own to figure out how to deal with remote participation. It's an area where we could certainly look to make it better. Right now, we're not doing a great job. A couple of things we've been added relatively recently. We tried this for the first time at IETF 100. We had space in the lounge where people could continue to work on code, during the week. Of course, you could do this anywhere, but we just tried to make it a little bit more convenient by making an identifiable space where they could meet and having this sign-up sheet. And you can see some sign-ups. It's not full, but you can see some teams did take advantage of that by signing up. Other teams didn't sign up, but just went there anyways. We tried this in Singapore, and no one signed up. But Alexa told me, well, we always try, we have this three meeting rule, and so let's try it 3 times and see what happens. So this is at least an encouraging thing that people are using it and hopefully finding it useful to come together and work around on, to find time within their IETF schedule to work together on code. The other thing we did for the first time was this hack demo happy hour. And the idea behind that was anyone who wanted to could demo their project. We kind of had done something similar at Bits and Bytes before. As you know, we no longer have Bits and Bytes. So the thought was try to take some of the benefit we had of being able to demo hackathon projects to the whole IETF community, but do it in a different kind of lower cost, low overhead type of setup. So it went pretty well. We had 8 teams present their stuff, and we actually got a fair number of people coming through. We did overlap a little bit with the sessions, and we saw a big uptake once the last session of the day ended, and it worked out pretty well. So I think this is something we would probably look to do in the future. But actually, I did want to see, did anyone have experience here with either the Code Lounge or this happy hour and have anything they wanted to share? Yeah.
So this is Thomas Otena. We use the Code Lounge quite a bit. This time I wasn't aware of it in Singapore. I think it's very useful to be able to just go back during the week and do a hackathon, mini hackathon, kind of more private. I think that's great. And whether it's the Code Lounge or whether it's just the room being open and being able to work there is absolutely needed, I think. One thing I would say is I've received emails about who's responsible for this, and I see kind of something's related to you. Are you responsible for that? So in the Code Lounge wiki, I know it's just an edit button, but we could have a same as what you have for the hackathon, a person that's responsible, kind of a little text of what is going to be discussed, because currently, one cell, you don't want to put a whole sentence in there.
Okay,
so it's like very cryptic.
Okay. No, great.
We'll have a work group meeting right now, and so we'll use this, this afternoon to have code related extension of that meeting in the Code Lounge, which is very cool.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
It's a good idea.
I'm not going to run all the way down there, but we actually used the Code Lounge. It was 2 things I was going to say. One, we had a remote participant who was an active part of it, and it worked. It was a little bit clunky, but it worked really well. But we used the Code Lounge because it gave we did some original development and testing, and then we had like a window where the development could continue, and then we came back again for some more testing and interop testing. So I think it was very helpful to have a spot to go. And the other thing, you mentioned it earlier that I wanted to mention was we specifically planned our project because we felt like we'd reached an impasse in the working group, and we were trying to we were using it as a strategy to get past an impasse. So I think that is something people want to consider.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you. I'm glad it's being used. It was very easy because we had the IETF lounge anyways, and like I said, we're really just taking room there. But it just seems to help by having it identified as such, and tries to, get people, make it a little bit easier for them to find each other. So I think, yeah, that's it for my presentation. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have about things we can and should do at the hackathon to make it more useful for you. If there's things you wish we brought up, or you want us to say at the next one, or to remind people, or anything like that. I'd love to hear your comments now or whenever you think of them.
David Bob, just going to get up and suggest a round of applause. Over 200 participants, project list doesn't fit on one slide. Very well done. Keep it up.
Okay, thanks. And I do applaud all of you, and I always, the hackathon, it was interesting because the first couple of hackathons I had to work really hard to twist people's arms and say, hey, this stuff you're doing, I think it would make for a good project. Why don't you come and do this? I don't really have to do that anymore. It's just people come out of the woodwork with their projects, and a lot of that's because of the way you guys are dealing with it too within your working groups, and I appreciate that. Anything you can do to encourage it even more, I think, is great. And yeah, I'm glad it's useful, and definitely we plan to keep doing it. So thanks a lot, and thanks for the time to run through this.
Okay, at this part of the agenda, we're at the open mic part, which is basically any issues that working group chairs want to discuss. And I wanted to start it off with we would like to set up a design team to look at what we currently have available for working group chairs training, how to reorganize it, and how to improve what we've got. There's some material on the website. There's actually a working group chair resources page on the website. There's a wiki, but there's a lot of information. It's hard to find, and I think we sort of have two sets of, two objectives. One is sort of the new working group chair coming in. What do you need to know to get started as a working group chair? And then there's the working group resources just going forward, all of the things that you need to use on a regular basis. So I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments or suggestions for the working group chair's materials at the moment. Since I see nobody in the queue line, I'm assuming not. Oh, I guess they do. And if you...
Mahesh Jetanandani. I wanted to give a shout out to John Scudder about his note on or a checklist of items of how to present in a work group meeting. The topic has been discussed on the mailing list. I see a lot of discussions around it. I think it would be good to expand it to the remaining working groups and really look at that list to see how presenters should be preparing to present at the working group meeting.
Actually, I specifically meant to bring up that example and I forgot. I think it was an excellent discussion, and it's the kind of thing that I think we can use the working group chairs list to discuss, and then we need to document it somewhere. And I know in general, the routing area has a whole, my understanding is they have a whole series of educational materials that they've provided over the years that would be helpful possibly to up-level to all of the areas.
Tim Jones +1. Got there 2 seconds before me, exactly the same comment.
Okay.
Dave Taylor, same thing. The question I was going to ask is, okay, if we can come up with a generic version that working groups can specialize, right? Because it was mentioned that there's one or two things that are sort of specific to that particular working group in there that are perhaps more constrained than what you might have. Well, you could do X or do Y or whatever, which is some of the discussion on the list. And so the question is, where should we put such a thing? Because it's not, because the TAO is like looked at by new people coming to the IETF, not necessarily by the presenters. And the working group chair training materials are looked at by working group chairs. And so I don't know does IDR, do you guys put them on your own web page? It's associated with your working group, or how do you actually evangelize stuff to participants? And so that's what I wanted to add, not to participants, to presenters. And so that's what I wanted to ask in general, what the best practices are is once you have that kind of thing, because we'd like to probably adopt that for our working group too, what's the best way to make that be available and poke presenters? Like when you get a request for session, you say, please go and read this page, or what do you guys do?
Charles Eckel. So maybe this is only a partial answer to this, but something we tried for the first time. Sarah, she was in the hackathon with me, and we were talking about the presentations to do, like what people should put in their presentations, and actually just creating a template that had those things in there and kind of spelled it out. That helped from a point of view of getting their slides together. I don't know if you'd want to put the information in that template too, but maybe a template combined with something else, or just a template could be a good help here.
John Scudder, in answer to Dave's question, what do we do? When we send out a call for agenda topics, that wiki URL is one of the things, and I sort of try to. The wiki actually came out because I was putting all the guidelines in the call for topics, and it was getting really long. So I had to keep finding it and cutting it and pasting it, and I thought, okay, well maybe we should put this somewhere else. So it goes in the call for topics, and like I said in the email that kicked off the thread, it's far from perfect in terms of how much presenters are actually apparently heeding it and taking it to heart. But it's better than nothing. I would be, very happy to have, new ideas for how to get people, and, yours is one, is, maybe if we can provide a little bit of a carrot. Here's a partially pre-populated slide deck that will save you some work. Saving people work is often a good way to get them to pay attention.
Jeff, sort of on a related standpoint, just trying to find in either the working group chairs wiki or our front page links to the newcomers training material that we give, if it's part of like tutorials on Sunday. Because part of the checklist is here's what we expect before you want to present. It's also useful to say, here's what presenters should know as part of doing their job. Things like how do you talk into a microphone without everything.
Right. There is there's a lot of information out there, but it's really hard to find and it's not well organized. And which brings me back to my original point, which is we would love to have a small design team to look at it. And we would love that small design team to have a mix of old timers and newcomers, new working group chairs in particular. I do think the question about where we put, we do have information and sites targeted to newcomers, and we have information and sites targeted to like working group chairs, but regular presenters, I'm not exactly sure where that would go. So that might be a question, but I do think there's some, useful reminders. The one other thing somebody else said that I was thinking about and didn't respond quite quickly enough to was, I think one of the challenges with developing things like guidelines to working group chairs on any particular topic is we, as a community, tend to want to be really prescriptive, and then you get into debates about, what is the right technique to manage the queue, or what is the right technique to do jabber scribing. And I think a lot of times somebody said, there's 2 or 3 different ways to do this, and I think providing the information, but still providing the flexibility for working group chairs to manage their working groups in ways that make most sense for the culture of that particular working group is really important. Go ahead, David.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add something because I just realized that we also have a similar document in the education team that we're actually sending out to the tutorial presenters that Alice helped write at some point, and that's available on the Edu Team Wiki. So we might want to take that into account as well, and maybe combine it with the document we're discussing right now that John wrote. So I'll take note of that.
Oh yeah, that is true. We do have a document we send to presenters for tutorials. David?
Dave Waltermeyer. I'm interested in helping with the design team if you're looking for volunteers.
I am. Excellent.
And on that note, how would someone volunteer for that effort?
Probably we're going to send a request onto the working group chair mailing list. What we've been trying to do coming out of these meetings is sort of summarize like our action items. And we actually have like a little working group chairs forum piece of the wiki where, by the way, you can suggest future topics for the working group chairs forum. Somebody told me recently that, or I heard through the grapevine recently that that these sessions are becoming boring. So if you all want them to be more interesting, you need to tell us what you want or need. Otherwise, we don't need to have the lunches.
Jeff Haas, answering my own question, more digging, it's /about/participate, but it took a little bit of digging to find it.
Okay, thank you. You were volunteering, right? You were a second volunteer, right?
I think I read
and with that, and because the queue is empty and it is 1:14 and we're supposed to end at 1:15, thank you very much. Do take a look at the materials that are on the website and in the various wikis and think about how to make it easier and faster for people to find what they need to know. All right. Thank you all.